Hey guys, it's Belle, and in this video we are going to be reading through and translating yet another poem by Saint Eugenius II of Toledo. I swear by the end, I think I might have actually translated and covered about, what, a third of his poetry, like from his book of songs already on this channel, and if it goes on by the end, we'll have a whole translated volume completed on here. And there's others that I intend to cover that I haven't yet done here. Goodness. Anyway. I just love him so much, guys. He's my favorite poet. What can I do? This is the epitaph that he wrote on the grave of Queen Recciberga, who was married to King Receswinth. Now, there are two readings that one can take of this poem, the Lectio Facilior and the Lectio Difficilior. I will be giving you both of these. I think the Lectio Difficilior is more fun, and I want to believe it's true. We will get to it. Okay. As usual, if you want to have a go at translating this text using the gloss I've provided, feel free to do so. And forgive me as usual if my Latin pronunciation is not the greatest when it comes to poetry. So here we go. Si dare pro morte gemmas liquisset et aurum, nulla malla poterant regum dissolvere vitam. Sed quia sors una cuncta mortalia quassat, nec pretium redimit reges, nec fletus agentes. Inc ego te coniux, quia vincere fata nequivi, funere per punctam sanctis commendo duendam. Ut cum flamma varax veniet comburrere terras, jetibus ipsorium merditos ociata resurgas. At nunc carda mi iam Recciberga valetto, quodque pardo per retrum rex regisquintus amato. Coniuge de fleta restat edicere summam, qua tenuit vitam symbol et coniubia nostra. Fedra conjugi septem fereduxit in annis, undecies binni sevum commensibus octo. Okay, so what does all of this mean? Si dare per morte gemmas liquidit et aurum. If it had been possible to give gems and gold instead of death, pro morte, nulla mala poterant regum dissolvere vitam, no evils would have been able to break up the life of kings. Sed quia sors una cuncta mortalia quassat, but since one fate shakes all mortal beings, and this verb quassare Eugenius uses to describe, the imminent threat of death to his own life, because he was writing these poems as an old man. So this seems to be a word that he associates with death. Nec pretium redimit reges, nor neither, well, pretium is hard to translate. It can be price, it can mean reward, money, basically. Neither does money save the life of kings, nec fletus agentes, nor does weeping avail those who are lacking mourning a spouse. Hinc ego te coniux, quia vincere fata nequivi. Hence I, O wife, since I was not able to conquer the fates, funere per punctam sanctis commendo tuendam, I commend you in a funeral procession, having deceased, to the saints. And then tuendam is quite an interesting bit here, meaning to be looked at. So there's a few different things that we can gain about Visigothic funeral rites from reading Eugenius of Toledo's poetry. And I'm going to be doing a full video at some point looking at all of the different, I guess trying to reconstruct almost what a Visigothic funeral ceremony might have looked like based on what we can see from their writings. But this tuendam here means to be looked upon. So it sort of implies that Queen Recciberga her body has been put out on display in some way during the process of the funeral. So they might have had like an open casket funeral, which is interesting. ut cum flamma vordax veniet cum burder veteras, so that when the hungry fire shall come to burn up the lands, cetibus ipsorum meritos ociator thesurgas, you may rise up associated to their gatherings, basically, through your merit. Now, there's a few there's a few interesting ways to read it. We'll get into the lectio Virgilior and the lectio Facilior now, because I'm not fully sure who exactly is speaking here. Who is this ego? It could be perhaps even the easier reading is that King Recciberga is meant to be the one speaking throughout all of this. And so that's why he says, therefore, because I was not able to overcome the fates, O wife, I commend you to the saints. And it would also, to some extent, explain why he's talking about the offering gems and such to save a king's life, although we do know that Eugenius of Toledo did in fact write this poem. It wasn't King Recciberga himself, unless Recciberga wrote it and Eugenius is transmitting it, although, as I mentioned above, with use of the word quasare and other things, this seems in the style of Eugenius's writing it. It doesn't seem out of place at all to me, as somebody who's quite familiar with Eugenius's poetry. So on stylistic grounds, it seems quite likely that Eugenius did himself write this. So anyway, moving on to the next bit. At nunc cara mi Recciberga valeto. So, but now, O beloved Recciberga, so Recciberga, who is already beloved to me, farewell. Quodque paro feretrum rex recis vintus amato. So this line is kind of ambiguous, okay, because paro is I adorn, I prepare, etc. And it could, in theory, refer to Eugenius of Toledo adorning the feretrum is like the hearse or pretty much the coffin, basically. It could refer to Eugenius of Toledo adorning this, and maybe he's been giving this speech beforehand as part of the funeral rites. And then it's possible that Eugenius sort of hands over the funeral to King Recciberga, and he says, "O King Recciberga, may King Recciberga love that coffin which I am adorning." And actually there's another sort of reading of it also, which I think is, for this particular line, is more plausible. And that's the reading that Paro actually refers to the inscription itself, like a literal talking inscription. Here I think the much more plausible reading, unfortunately, is that these last four lines are King Recciberga himself standing up at the funeral and saying, "With my wife having been mourned, it remains to speak of the highest life which she held, and our marital unions," basically. Ferra conjugi septem fere duxit nanis, or the summary, we could say, for summum, in which she had her life and our marital unions. So essentially saying this is like a summary of the part of her life that was married to me and the part that was, or just like how many years she lived. So, ferra conjugi septem fere duxit nanis. She carried out her marital duties for almost 7 years. And then we have a wanky way of describing her age, undecie spinis. So, 2 times 12. This is a thing that the Visigoths do for whatever reason. I don't know. They just like to express ages with this bizarre number system where they just like give halves and they're like 2 times 10 plus 4 or something. It's really dumb. So anyway, she lived for 11 times 2, which is 22 years, commensibus octo, with 8 months. So the perceptive among you will have noticed that this would mean that Queen Recciberga was married to King Recciberga at roughly 15 years of age, because of course this is the age at which the Visigoths believed that a person came into the age of majority and was considered a legal adult. So There we go. I think that's the likely reading, basically, is that these last four lines were said by King Regismund himself at the funeral, and perhaps this stuff was written beforehand, but it could also quite plausibly just be the stuff that's on the tomb itself. All of this reading could quite plausibly not be a speech that was given at the funeral, but rather just like something that was, inscribed on the tomb, because it makes sense either way, basically. The only thing that makes me maybe think that it was recited at the funeral is this word here, funus, which is like funeral rites or a funeral procession. And it raises a question also, actually, of whether the te pelefunctam tuendam here refers not to the body of Queen Recciberga herself, but maybe to an image of Recciberga, which is carved onto the coffin, or perhaps a sort of statue of her. It's hard to tell. I don't believe that we have the actual epigraphic specimen of this surviving to compare and see if we actually do have a carving of her on the tomb itself. It would be a fascinating question, and speaking of fascinating questions, there will be a video coming up at some point way in the future about compiling the evidence we have for what a Visigothic funeral rites would have been like, because I think it's quite an interesting subject, and we get lots of little glimpses into that in poetry written by Eugenius and Toledo, such as this one recording the epitaph of Queen Recciberga. So to very quickly go over it from start to finish and give you the English translation. If it was possible to give gold and gems instead of death, no evils would have been able to break up the life of kings. But since one death shakes all mortal beings, neither does money redeem the life of kings, nor does weeping avail those who are mourning them. Therefore, I, since I was not able to conquer the fates, commend you, my deceased wife, to be gazed upon in a funeral procession to the saints, so that when the hungry flame shall come to burn up the lands, you may rise once again to be associated in their councils with merit. But now, farewell, O Recciberga, already beloved to me, and may King Regismund love that coffin which I now adorn. With my wife being mourned, what remains is to be said is the summary of the life which she had, and also our unions together. She fulfilled her marital duties for almost 7 years, and she lived for 22 years, 8 months. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want me to teach you Latin so that you can do all these kinds of analyses yourself, you can subscribe to my Patreon, where for choir tier patrons and upwards, I offer tuition at lower than market rates. You can also join my Discord server, where I tend to post these glosses as pictures before I turn them into videos, so you can get early access there. And we also have lots of other resources for learning medieval languages. You should come and join us. Until next time, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye, everyone.